I have my schedule here. Salud. So why D3 and why D3 in the context of Dahlia? I have been the most concerned about using this technology in our toolbox because I consider that can be convoluted and can generate a lot of distractions and can make complex solutions for things that are already there. We have a lot of wide-level chart libraries that we can use. It's the same question you can do when you are implementing a website. Do I need a custom implementation or can a WordPress work for me? And until now, I think WordPress was working for us. AM Chart or Chart.js will give us the solutions we needed. But I think we are reaching the limit. Two reasons. I think we are reaching the limit, especially with Reports Dashboard. With all these lines, with all these significant difference, we are hacking the AM charts. I don't have experience, correct me if I am wrong, but I think if we haven't reached it yet, we are going to do it. It's going to be a moment that AmChart is not going to give us the effects, the representation, the color palette, or the tool tips, or the animations that we are looking for. So let's open this. I don't say to implement it, but let's open. And I was experimenting with this, and I'm starting to be a fan of it. It's not that complex as I thought. And for simple solutions, I don't recommend it. But when they request some more fancy stuff or more customized stuff, I really recommend it. Then there is another reason I think D3 is interesting for us. One of these is this book is called The Big Book of Dashboards. It's not really fancy book. It's about administration dashboards. It's about monitor data to get insights from there. What I was seeing on this book is that most of the examples that this book is showing are not normal charts, are not just bar chart or scatter plot or line chart. There are really customized things. So I need to see, I don't know, the population on Sun City, and I don't want to see a bar. This is not representative for me. I need to see a way to compare city by city, to have a visualization, to go in deep onto the data that I'm looking for. So when I was reading this book, I was seeing that all the examples are really customized. It's like, and it's very nice. It's a new language. And we see this book is allowing the data to talk in its own language. Its own language might be not bar charts, might be big circles with a shape of a car. Maybe it's more interesting than a bar chart. So allowing the data to speak in its own language. My examples are not going to be very fancy, but I want to show you this page here. Is called Data Sketches, and I don't know. This is a game that these two persons has about. Let's propose a theme, and then let's do a data representation talking about this theme of this subject. I really like the left part of this website. The right part, I was not able to see the dynamic implementation, but for example, you can see all this is, I think, is done by D3. I was checking, and I think most of the examples I have seen has been done by D3. My computer is a bit clumsy. This one exactly, I don't know what is this, but others I was checking. You see very clear how the visualization selected is very specific for the data that is representing. In this case, it's talking about which is the most popular songs among history, and you say there is no bar chart. There is not any bar chart here, but still you see the data. You see how there are very big in consideration among other songs that are more important. You can use, for example, this red dot here for a specific reason. When there is a trigger is crossed, for example, when it's the number 1, this is a special one. And you can create different layouts or different iterations. There was one very fancy about the connection, this one, the connections between kings, family members. So this person, in order to represent, you really cannot see anything there. Yeah. To really represent which is the connections between family members, instead of doing a boring tree connection, she made or he made this illustration, and also it hides a very complex computational network calculus to see, for example, from this person to this person, which is the shorter path. So this person cannot solve this with normal chart. You really have to. What I want, if someone I want to get from this talk is just really be free. You have this data set. How this data set can be visualized the best way in the human perspective, because at the end visualization is for humans, data is for computers. So how can be the shape of this data? One disclaimer: I am not an expert of D3. I have been working with this 3 weeks. My intention is not give you a very deep understanding of D3. I am not able. Also, my examples are not as fancy as this. I didn't have time to make it fancy, but I hope at least covers the basics, so you can fly solo from here. List of contents. D3 has its own language, its own idiosyncrasy, and at the beginning it's very convoluted, and it's like it's a lot of what moments when you are playing with D3. But interestingly, also after you get used to it, it becomes intuitive. Somehow it happens to me. It has happened to me. Is my mindset working in resonance with D3? Sometimes this is not happening with other language for me. And also, one thing is very verbose. So when you have a normal chart, you might see that the code is super big. It can be a bit scare you at the beginning, but it's not that, because everything is explicitly said. There are very few things that are implicit. So this is a big difference from normal charts libraries, that everything is implicit. You just have to configure. Let's start. Okay. Instead of going for the first exercise, I'm gonna try to go for this first. Okay, how the world feels. You all know the original initiatives, mostly driven by Valentin, that we want to measure how the world feels. And I use this data set because I know it was gonna resonate to us. So I was thinking, how can I represent this data set? Of course, I didn't put too much thought, and I am not an expert in visualization. This is the naive approach I took. And you can see all the countries, you can see the feelings, and the size of the circle represents the ratio against other circles, other feelings on the same country. So let's try to implement this very quick. I'm gonna go very fast. It's not gonna be step by step, but let's see, using this exercise to see some interesting parts from D3, or some, let's say, some basic parts. So let me see. This is my version working in local. Of course, it's not close to what you have seen in the other version. The reason is that I have removed most of the JavaScript code from there. First thing, let's see how the dataset looks like. This is my dataset. I clean it a lot from the original Daria completions, and I get these aggregations. We have the country codes here. We see some weird country codes because our system is responding some unknown countries, but we see, for example, Argentina here. I think it's Argentina. You can see the per filling, which is the percentage allocated for this country for every filling. So once we have the dataset can be anything, can be JSON, CSV, and D3 has a lot of libraries to load it. How do we load the data? D3 has some helper libraries to load these files, can be from internet, so it's using Ajax. And then the first thing is to maybe remap some attributes from the CSV that we want to remap it from our variables. in case the CSV is not really exactly what we need. So for example, I see I am creating an ID, and I am making an integer in case the CSV sometimes is digested as strings. So I have to be sure that numbers are numbers. Yeah, this is the plus trick. Also, I have to say I'm using the Emacs 6 syntax just for convenience, but it might be not work in all the browsers. So just I'm gonna go in detail later, but I just want to see how this progress from where are we to the version we have seen moving. This is the data set is coming to this function. This function is calculating some correlations between my numbers and the dimensions of the window. I am creating a group SVG element to allocate all my dynamic generated components there. And this is the magic. Here is the magic. Here is where I say to D3, this is my data set. Generate elements based on this data set attributes. We will go later to see this cryptical syntax. What I want you to see is that the circles are already here. So here are the circles. This D3 has generated for me, and they already has a radius because I tell to do it. Now, what will be next? Under my perspective, here is the radius. It's not D3 didn't invent the radius. I explicitly tell to D3 what is the radius. Now, my first approach will be, okay, let's allocate the circles vertically per country. So not all the countries in the same line, but you have lines per country. How do I do this? So I define I coordinate, and follow me here. It's a bit magic, but it's actually it's nothing magic. It's all these functions has been explicitly defined, but this is kind of a pattern, a standard I have seen in the D3 code. This kind of functions helpers. Scale D, yes. So we are lucky that we are not. Let's see if I am doing X. Yes, circle is not Y coordinate, it's ZY coordinate. This is some of the, which is not working either. Let me see, because I have my original one. We see, where are my circles? Yeah, CAY. I did everything right, so I assume the problem will be in the console. And
does it also need to be CX rather than X?
I still haven't not started with the CX, so this should not be the problem. CI attribute for some reason. Yeah?
It should be epsilon value, not epsilon scale.
Ah, perfect. Thank you. You are a D3 expert already.
No, just
Perfect. So still is a mess, but we see things moving, and we see that I'm starting to get where I'm going. So what about moving horizontally, just dividing by sentiment, by feeling? So again, I know this is magic, showing like magic, but we will go later to see what all this means. The scale and the value. Okay, so we have the circles. Now they are very anonymous because we don't have any reference to what every coordinate means. Let me see. Let's change the color. Let's put every feeling has to have a different color. I'm gonna copy something here because I have my table of colors here, and I can just initialize it somewhere here before I need it. And then I can change the color of these circles. It's fill. This is also not D3 specific, not even the CX, not the CI. This is SVG specific. So we're then manipulating SVG attributes, not D3 specific attributes. So
it's SVG based completely.
yeah. You can manipulate any kind of DOM components. You can generate paragraph, divs, but it is more powerful when you do it with SVG. Later we are going to see that we can generate paragraphs or divs if it's convenient for us. So how do we fill the color? We call a function and we return our colors hash from here. And as you see, every color is associated with a filling. Where is my filling allocated in the D element? So if we see our CSV is called filling. So D filling goes at the first, right? So we now have colors by filling. What if we see the circles are very or one over the other? So let's add some transparency so we really see behind them. Again, it's just manipulating another CSV attribute, which is opacity, and we just fix it like 08. Well, we see now that unless we can see the colors, we can split the circles if we want more. I mean, we can do everything. This is just my template. What if we put some magic thing like a transition? Will be nice to have a transition. So I'm gonna say that the radio is gonna be here at the end, but in the middle I'm gonna trigger a transition, and it's gonna be a duration of 1 second. What is going to happen is that D3 is going to inject these elements right away, but the radio is going to be set in a transition way. So it's going to interpolate all the intermediate states to reach the final one. And then we see this fancy effect that is now running. I don't think it's an error. Yeah, it's a typo, no? Transition. Right. Whoop. It's not really visible. I'm gonna put 2 seconds.
This is like executing this linearly.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen delay. I haven't seen the first circle runs after I haven't seen it.
Yeah, but you change, for example, the attribute of values before transition, you will not see that.
No, of course not, because you mean the code is executed in this direction? Yes, yes. It's all the attributes before the transition are set immediately, right away, and the attributes after the transitions are run not after. Is a transition. It's between. One thing I did in my final thing is to do a funny thing, is to put a delay. So the effect is not going to start until I say. So let's say 1 second. So the whole thing is going to stack for 1 second and then going to start. As this is, these methods we will see later are executed individually per every element, I can do individual setups. I can, instead of putting a real value, I can add a function here. And this function is going to return a random, but I don't know how this is done. So I'm going to copy from here. You can do this directly, I think. So instead of delaying 2 seconds, I do a random delay. So the circles pop up in different, it's just more appealing visually. Of course, has not any impact in the validation of the visualization. Let's add some iterations. Means the user wants to do things. The iterations I always try to do is to put tooltips. to specifically what this circle has inside. Right now I cannot see it. Iterations are a bit verbose, so I'm gonna try to do something in real time, but I'm gonna copy others, the biggest part. So we just create events as any JavaScript event thing. We can define the mouse over event, and we associate a function. Let's say on over. This is my function, and I declare the function here on the top. Say const on over, and these functions receive the actual data element that is being processed, which is very handy. I can see here, for example, I can put a log on over. Over. I will be yes, and I can just to see.
There is a typo.
Yeah.
It's console.
Console. Thank you. Mouse. Yeah. Thank you. This will be a very nightmare if I don't see these typos. Right. So this is doing almost nothing, but unless I will see that the connection is done, it will make me very happy just to see I can trigger this event. So if I refresh and I over, there it is. So I see that it's just logging the data element that is being associated with this specific DOM element. Right, so I can do things here. What I can do, first what I do is I want this circle to be, let's see all the row, not only this circle, but all the family circles associated by country are gonna be bigger. Let's say, so there are many ways to do this, but I did a trick. So I use CSS selectors to identify the whole row. So I say, for example, I'm gonna select all the circles that are that the country code, okay, let me see the country code. I'm messing up a bit snake case with camel case because my CSV was like this. So I'm gonna select all the circles that has this class, and I'm gonna change one attribute. The attribute is gonna be the radius, and I'm gonna use the same formula of the radius I have here, which is the original one, but I'm gonna add 20, whatever is the result. If I execute this, nothing is gonna happen because the class is not magically associated with the element. I have to explicitly associate it. So after the append circle, I add another attribute, which is class, and then the class is gonna be the country code. I have my doubts that this is gonna work right away, but let's try. Somehow it's working. Actually, it's working. It's doing exactly what we are asking to do and nothing else. The else should be, okay, in the mouse over, I want to squish again. So I implement the mouse, in the mouse out. So I implement the mouse out, and I create my on mouse out handler out. I don't need this anymore. I know it's working. And I'd say for all these circles, I'm gonna re-establish the original radius, which was the original one. So if I do this, I see the circle is growing and squashing magically. Ah, perfect. What else we can do? What about tooltips? So what we have seen, so put information in these elements that help us to see what is inside of what is the real value, because sometimes visualization so is okay, but the real value is also necessary. So I use my handler functions to create new elements. And I'm gonna copy paste something from here. You see my production handler is much bigger, you see? It's all this. It has more things. But basically this is what I need to do. I need to create text elements associated with a portion of the data, not the whole data, but just a portion of it. Let me copy this to our development version. The portion of the data that I want to create elements for is all the data. From all the data, I'm going to take wherever element country code is the actual country code of the element, but, and this is I added this later, but the percentage has to be bigger than 0. There are some circles that represent a 0. We will see later because there is not anyone voting for this. Let me see if this works right away, because I don't know if I have to associate this first. Yeah, something is missing. Let me see if console is very, very helpful most of the times. Yeah, percentage format is not declared. It's a formatter, okay? Because as you have seen, the percentage sometimes are very long. So JavaScript has some formatters. I don't know if it's JavaScript or D3 associated, but it's D3. So this is a formatter. D3 has multiple libraries to help you with these things. We will see later. So I just declare the formatter somewhere here, and maybe I can use it already. Okay, nice. We have the tooltips there. As before, D3 is doing what we ask it to do, but nothing else. The tooltips are not disappearing in the mouse out. We have to do it explicitly. As I say, it's very verbose. We have to do everything explicitly. One thing we can do also, apart from associating stylists directly here in code, is nothing is stopping us to make some styling in CSS. This is SVG element. Is HTML native. It's nothing individually with D3. So, for example, for my circle tips, I have this one. Very simple styling that gives and it's not working. Maybe I have to really refresh. Yeah, so much better now. As I say, D3 is not removing the text in the mouse out. D3 doesn't know anything what that means. You have to say everything explicitly. So what about going to the mouse out here and removing these elements? I don't know how I did it before, but maybe we can just select all the text elements and remove them. This is very hardcore, and it might remove things that you are not expected, but for the demo effect, for the demo reason, let's see if this works. So yes, it's working for our example. Okay, you see that there is already a transition because in my copy paste I already added that there was a transition there. We can also associate a transition here in the when the tooltip disappear with a if we don't put duration, it's 200 milliseconds. Before remove, because remove has not cannot be interpolated. We need to put something that can be interpolated. We can put fill opacity to 0, so it's gonna blur down. So appear, yeah, it's very fast because it's 200 milliseconds, but it's enough to produce this soft effect. Right, tooltips, and last thing for the word exercise is what these circles means. So the axis. horizontal and vertical, but the axes can be everywhere. Can be in the middle, can be 2 axes on one side, 3 axes in the other. D3 provides you tool to easily generate axes and populate it with number of values, but it's up to you where you allocate it with information you put there. And I'm gonna copy paste a lot of code here because axes are very, very verbose. Here, axes are this, no, this is a scale. Axes is this. All this is just to generate the 2 axes plus the scales that has been defined before. Let me see if this works right away. I think the plural is axes. Okay. It's not working, and I assume it's going to be something on the console. EScale has not been defined. I did some mistakes. In this case, I declare the axes before the scales. We will see scales later. I need the scales in order to see which is the dimensions and the values of the axis. Still not working. Okay. Still, this is not the proper way to put it. I need to declare the container, which is the G element that there. Oh, so we have the axes, and well, one thing you can see now already. When I mouse out, the axes disappear. This is because I have deleted all the axes. We have to have a way to identify only to remove a specific text, and I have this. When I create the element, I associate this class, so I can really go in only removing these text elements. So now, now the axis text remain. This is not any magic thing. This is a text element with a content. If we inspect it, we will see that it's just a text element with a line, with a group to organize things. So now, for example, I can style this with CSS, and this is what we are going to do now. So these 2 small CSS is going to do a huge difference. There we are. So we are very close, if not finished. Yeah. So this is as far as I want to go with this part of the workshop in this exercise. So from the very beginning until this, you have seen it's a verbose, and some things are not intuitive, but it's not complex. It's very in our reach of our hands to do visualization fancy as this. I mean, of course I am biased because I did it. I know it's not completely perfect, but it has something special, something custom, something personal. Now, let's go back to the specifics, because this is what I want you to get. I want you to get what are the weird things from D3, so you can fly solo from here. If we go back to, no, I don't have it here anymore. Let's open it here. First thing, if you want to run these examples in your computer, you need a web server running. Can be SDS, can be Node server or Python something, because we load the data using Ajax, and Ajax has some security limitations, and you cannot load from your hard drive directly. So this is the exercises. We have half an hour, less than half an hour. So let's go quick. First one. Here is D3 generating just normal DOM elements. D3 is not only oriented to generate SVG, but even is very powerful with that. But you can generate also. Let me open my editor here. So how this is done. This is exercise 1, and you see the code. This is the code. This is the code that generates these paragraphs here. I have my data set, which in this case is the most vanilla data set possible, just a list of numbers. and I select chart, which is one div on the DOM, and on this div I'm gonna start applying D3 magic. In this case, I'm gonna generate as many paragraphs as elements has my dataset. And here is some of the tricky parts or obscure things of D3. Where are these paragraphs? They are not anywhere here. They doesn't exist. How can I select them? Well, the case is you can, even if they don't exist. You can select not an empty list of paragraphs. Now you associate this empty list of paragraphs or whatever is the size of these elements with a data. I don't want to say array because it can be whatever structure data that you can iterate over it. I think array is a good example. And then you say, okay, and then I can fork. How many of this data has an element associated with it? In this case, none. All the data elements are free. They don't have a paragraph yet. Then, to associate these data elements, I use the magic word enter. If I want to associate whatever data elements has already a paragraph, it's here. It's in this step of the method chain. If I want to select how many data elements are gonna disappear because are not anymore in the array, but there is a component, I use exit. I know it sounds crap now, but just follow me here, okay? I don't have any data element, any paragraph. So this in this state of the method chain is empty, but there is a lot of data elements that has no paragraph. So in this state of the method chain is full. It's all the data element that has not a paragraph. So what I want to do with all these data elements that still has not a paragraph, I want to append a paragraph. Oh, fancy. Now when this is done, and in this state of the method chain, I have all the paragraph elements. And whatever method I do from there are affecting these paragraph elements. In this case is changing the text. I can put hi. Hi. And I can yeah. I can change another things. This is a HTML element. I can change the style. I can say color pink. Nice. And another magic thing about D3 is that, as I say, for every element on the iteration, these attributes can receive a static value or a function. And this function, this is magically fed by the data element and by the index, in case you don't need it. Normally I don't need it, but sometimes you need it. And then you can do whatever you want in this function. In this case, as you have seen before, I add dynamic component into the text. Instead of say hi, I say hi something something. I say return hi, and then d. I don't need to add any dot anything because d is already the number. Hi 3, hi 45. Yeah. Okay, this is just to let you know what the simplicity of D3. This is not a DOM magic anything. It's just iterating over data and doing things with this data, manipulating DOM elements. These DOM elements, most of the cases are SVG elements for convenience, but not because it has to be like this. So this is the exercise 1. Exercise 2, of course. Let's do the first chart. Let's see how this is done. First chart. The data set is the same. The the setup of the HTML has a particularly. I added a SVG element for convenience. I can also inject the SVG element through D3 if I want to do dynamically, because the append is exactly this. I add elements, and I can use append, not necessarily with a dataset associate, but just directly. I can say rect, append something, or a char, append SVG. This is up to you. Okay, what is different? Mostly nothing. Instead of injecting paragraphs, and I am injecting rect, which is a SVG element. It's not D3 element, it's a SVG, it exists. There are rect, there are path, there are line, there are circles. So I add a rect because it's the most similar to a bar. And then I want to create a bar chart, so I use rects. I can use ovals, if it's up to you. Then I add the attributes. In this case, rect has its own specific attributes. In this case, it's x, y, width, height. And yes, as Anna will see here, there is some mathematics. But the mathematics here are very simple. In this case, it's just to try to figure it out, okay, how especially in the y side, how the y has to be in order to the bars to be aligned on the button. I don't want to go here because for me it's a lot of try and error, but once you have done, you just copy paste. Yeah. Some limitations of this approach, as we will see later, is that everything is too hard-coded. The width of the chart is hard-coded, the baseline is hard-coded, the number of elements is hard-coded, so we will see later how to do this more dynamic. Third exercise, scales, and here is another of the weird concepts of D3, but once you're thinking on it, is totally necessary. The scales is the way of D3 to help you to translate your real world numbers to dimensions in your window dimensions. For example, you have population per countries, and population per countries goes to 0 to 1,000 millions. But in your screen, you have 400 pixels. And if you want to use everything, 0 means 0, 1,000 millions is gonna mean 400 pixels, I say, in this case. If the screen is smaller, it's gonna be different. So instead of doing this matching manually, D3 provides you with this called scales, and if you check the documentation, there are scales for any kind of things. The scales has not to be always linear, meaning that there is always a formula I can apply to correlate one number to another. It can be, for example, ordinal, where there is not possible to create intermediate elements. So, for example, my colors example before, this was an example of ordinal, that one feeling is associated with one color, and there is not intermediate values, or more, or a square scale, or logarithmic scale, or whatever. In this case, it's simple, it's linear. So, and then for every scale, it has two important functions. One is the domain, which is the numbers of my real world, and the other one is the range, which is the numbers this real world number has to be translated to in order to be allocated on my screen. In this case, can be other things. Not always has to be coordinates. Can be other things. Can be radio, for example. The radio depends on my scale. So applying this scale, I can pass numbers from my real world, and then this function is going to return the correlated number for my screen. So I use scales in this example to figure it out which are my dimensions. What is this good? Because if I change, for example, the height of the SVG, everything is dynamic, and the representation numbers are going to also be adapted to this change. If I data size, instead of 100 bars, I have only 10, everything is going to be adapted. So this is what the scales are for. And this is something that requires sometimes to make the aha moment, but it's a lot of copy paste also, and a lot of thinking, because sometimes you don't want to start in 0. Maybe 0 in the real world means 10 on my example, because I don't want to put 0. This is not going to be any difference in the representation, but it's never going to be 0 here, even if it's 0. I don't know, this is things we can play with. Access, as we have seen, very important. This is this number that we see here on the left and on the bottom. Again, D3 has a lot of helper functions to help us to generate access. This is our access here. But it's not real magic. What it's doing is generating a list of components that is going to be rendered as SVG elements. So, and also another thing that is helping you is, for example, to decide how many, what is going to be the resolution of these numbers. Sometimes D3 makes its own calculations. Instead of showing all the values, it's going to give you some of them. For example, we can decide that only 4 numbers on the y-axis. You see, this is exactly not 4. And I don't have a reason for that. I was trying the other day, and then it's 10. You can say 2 only. It's also not 2, but you can see that you can manipulate this. And also D3 is going to have some defaults in case there is a lot of numbers. It's not going to show all of them. And as we have seen here before, these are just SVG elements with going to be lines and G, and we can manipulate through CSS, and we allocated, first of all we define them, and second we allocated. We are using the function call that I cannot give you any hint what is the difference between call and append, so I'm going to leave it there in the air. And also it's associated with a scale, as you can see here. Every access is associated with a scale, because the scale is going to tell you how many numbers I have to show and what are the nature of these numbers. So it's going to help to make the divisions and everything. And here is as before, the inner component is nothing to do with this with the access. The access are independent. One interesting thing is that if I remove this transform in the x-axis, you see the x-axis is going to generate it in the y0. Y0 is always in SVG world on the top, but I don't want it in the top, so I transform it just using normal HTML, CSS attributes. I transform it and I translate to the height of my SVG. This is a quick solution for this. There it is. So this is access. Tooltips, I'm not going to go there because we have seen it already in the previous exercise. I have to go a bit rush. We have seen also interactivity. We can see here what is in this example. Interactivity. This example is just showing the tooltip as before, but this is different tooltip. In this example, we see that on mouse over, you see it's very verbose. So just to add this tooltip, I have to add a group component just because I want to be organized. I want to add a rect component, which is the background green thing, and I want to add a text element, and all of these elements requires coordinates, dimensions, attributes. This is the counterpart of HTML. HTML gives you a lot of things for granted, and I really like these things. You also can generate tooltips just generating normal HTML components. That can be very helpful also, because SVG components requires a lot of customization, but one div with a text that has a lot of things for granted, spans as much as you need, and these kind of things that SVG doesn't give you. So I can put a div here if I want. What I don't see is how can I this append into this group here. Yeah, okay, because the group is stored in this function, in this variable, and this variable is the one that I append direct. So all the tooltips are going to be in these group elements. Maybe if I I cannot reach it. Yeah, and the mouse out, I just remove all the tooltips. This was simple one. And we are almost finished. Transitions, we have seen transitions before. Let's see if there is something new here. The transition in this example is just, instead of creating or disappearing the tooltip, I added a very small animation on it. One important thing about the transitions is this. Is, for example, this transition is to make the opacity to 1 in 500 milliseconds. This is, of course, if the initial state is not defined, okay, it's not saying what I wanted to say. In this case, it's not. Maybe there is a default value of 0. But what I want to say, and I want to avoid some poltergeist in your working solo, is that if the attribute you want to manipulate in the transition doesn't exist before the transition, there is not going to be transition. Sometimes you have to define the initial state in order the transition to work smoothly. Just keep this on the back of your mind if you have any poltergeist with transitions. Yeah, we have seen the delay. In this case, I am playing with the delay because I want the text to start appearing once the box has already finished its transition. I can do it this way, or I can use events. Transition also has events. And I thought I have it here already. Yeah. So for example, on mouse out, you can see on mouse out, blur it down. What it does is I select all the tooltips and all the rest, and I do a transition and I make it to look white instead of, which is basically making it transparent. I don't know why I choose this. But then on the end of this transition, I am calling this function, which will remove all the elements. In this case, maybe the example are maybe not useful, but just to give you the tip that transitions also can call events. Can be on start, on end, and I don't know if there are others. So you can concatenate transitions. Right, and we are almost there. I wanted to finish with something more fancy that we have seen, but this is what I did. It's not really fancy and it's not moving because I didn't have any time to add tooltips. I think it's very necessary to add tooltips because I don't know which planets are these, but you can see in this visualization the differences on size in the elements of our solar system is a great protagonist here.
Is Pluto on it?
Eh?
Pluto?
Who? This one? No, this is Sun. This is Sun. This is Sun. Ah, this one. Yes, that's. I cannot tell you because there's no tooltip, so I let you do. I let you for.
It's only the dimension. It's also the distance from the sun. It's
yeah, exactly. So this is another way that sometimes you want to put different dimensions in the same chart, and sometimes normal charts is not enough. In this case, as you say, I am putting dimensions and distances, and they are not compatible because, of course, these small planets are not into the sun. And I think.
In the sun, because the distance between them and the sun is smaller than the radius of the sun?
No, this is what the visualization represents, which is wrong, but it's because there is an incompatibility in the scales.
This is when the sun explodes and the entire thing.
The problem is that the
Would have at
distance,
some point.
the distance between planet is relative to my width of the SVG. Then this is, and the radio is just relative to, I think I just hard coded somewhere the scale. No, actually is the, no,
Since 3D, but just in Chile.
this is
They
not.
are specified.
Solar system. Well, actually it's Pluto, eh? Is what. And solar system.
This is the planet.
So the,
Well,
you see the radio, the scale of the radio is based on the maximum of my dataset radio values, and is correlated to 80. I can say also 10, and then what's going to happen, all the planets are going to be smaller. Maybe this is more associated with reality, maybe, but we have to find this number. I just put it there. But it's not interesting for me because I don't want to compare both dimensions at the same time. I want to see both dimensions to be comparable individually. So for me, this is more useful, even if it's not real representation. Some funny thing we can do here is just another thing we have seen here. We have seen this before in the text paragraph that we associate a dynamic function, but for example to the field I associate a standard color to every component, to every planet, but not for the sun. For the sun I want it yellow. So this just to give you an example how flexible this can be, because this is just JavaScript and this is a function. I can put everything there. Just make the jumping transition we have seen before. Just make it here. Transition, duration. Okay. Yes. Thank you. And whoop. Okay. And yeah, this is the end of what I want to cover. And now it's time for you. 1 minute. You have questions or something?
Can you resize this window?
No. And this is something that I don't know how to do it. And I have been in Stack Overflow, and I have. It must be possible. I mean, everything is dynamic. Everything is relative. So and SVG support transform zoom and everything, which is a vector thing. So you should be able to really manipulate the dimensions in real time. But I was not able to do it.
You have like a render call. Usually you have an event when the window is being resized, and it basically calls run you again to render it in new size.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So maybe this might be a very long hacking thing, but I was expecting this to be native from HTML. And I still haven't, I cannot put width 100%, for example, in the SVG. It does weird things. It's not flexible as any other DOM component, but it would be nice to figure out how to do it.
This is very flexible because basically you build everything from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
in comparison with an AMP chart or something like that. But do you know about any library of higher level like this one that is using D3 to do, for example, what AMP chart does? Meaning that we don't need to start from scratch.
There's one called C3, which is charts based on D3.
Okay, we can start from there. Okay.
Yeah, I assume a lot of commercial tools should be using D3 underneath, but yes, I also have been checking this C3 thing, and as Valentin said, it's a abstraction layer over Z3.
Yeah, I was not asking for abstraction. I was asking there's a set of very common patterns in graphs already done in D3 without any DSL. To start from there, okay. I need a
Yeah.
like that. I need to do it from scratch.
Yeah. C3 is one of the more, I think it's open source and everything.
We were looking quite with the design work and then reports dashboard and trying to do the significance display and stuff. We looked at some examples of D3, which were really cool. There was one on New York Times, I think. One of these American newspapers have way of doing journalism when they present the data in different formats depending on the story, and had some really nice D3-based examples.
Have you checked who was the author of this article?
I can't remember. I think on the D3 website there's like a list of examples, and one of those was linked into newspaper.
Because if I remember properly, I think the author was working for the New York Times, and I think he developed the library because of his work there. How it is. Yeah. So maybe it's exactly what I think. He started to be famous in one statistics. These statistics news that are following the surveys, the poll opinions about the elections. Then everybody is super addicted to see the results. I think this guy was creating very fancy visualizations of the surveys results, and was.
It's an amazing opportunity for us. Like as I think many people have said, we have all this data, but we don't show it off. Like for example, the report we did on transgender people in the U.S. Army, this kind of bill, things were run. We had a beautiful way to present it. This data journalism, with power tools.
Yeah. Exactly. Anna.
It's better for special projects, but I would think twice or 3 times before using D3 or even a D3-based library in the reports dashboard, because it's very procedural.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is not free of trade-offs. No, at all. It's not. I understand. So you think it's better for one wow project or one of these visualizations that are done are just like this, but we don't have to adapt to new situations of the reality.
But would you think the same? You will start now from D3 from C3.
Well, I don't know. We have to get C3 and just try to implement what is implemented in reports dashboard with C3 to be sure. I think it's not that hard, and if it's hard, then we don't use C3.
Well, so let's make a finish here. Thank you, everybody.